Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience as we resolve this GoToWebinar issue. So we'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Beginning Excel. I'm Janice Kaplan with the James Moore Marketing Department, and I'll be your host. First, we'd like to remind you about our new premium webinar series. Now, because our Excel training has been such a big hit, we've decided to offer a premium two-part deeper dive into some of the more complex areas of the software. Our presenters today are Dakota Spencer, manager, and Hillary Sear, senior accountant with James Moore & Company. Each of them has several years of experience serving government, nonprofit, and higher education clients. Both also use Excel extensively in their work on single audits and standard financial statement audits. So we'll go ahead and get to their information momentarily, and then we'll get started on the presentation. So there we go. So there's Hillary and Dakota right there. And there's Dakota. Hillary will get her camera on in just a second. There she is. Okay, and they're ready to give you all sorts of information Excel, so I'm going to turn it over to them. Hillary, Dakota, you're on.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Apologies for the delay with the technical difficulty issues. We just put our IT to work in a nice test so that they enjoy running in and out to make sure that they go to webinar was actually working. But as Janice said, I'm Dakota Spencer. I'm a CPA, and I've been an audit manager at James Moore for over 4 years now. I'm in public accounting for about 6 to 7 years. And with us today, I'll have Hillary, and I'll let her introduce herself.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar, and thank you for cooperating and waiting. My name is Hillary. I've been with James Moore for about 3 years now, but I have a total of 7 years experience in public accounting. We're going to go through some of our tips and tricks in Excel today, very basic level. We'll take you through what we think are some of the most useful Excel tools that you can have in your tool belts. Being auditors, we use Excel on a daily basis, whether it's simple tasks as far as having a spreadsheet to log our time to work on each job, to using Excel provided from our audit clients' systems. We also want to remind you that this is being recorded and will be put on our James Moore YouTube later. So if we move a little too fast and you can't follow that, you can go back to that and catch up on anything you missed.
Yeah, and as Hillary mentioned, so we're going to focus on a few efficiencies, hopefully, that we can build around Excel for you, hopefully show you a few tips and tricks that can actually speed up your Excel processing and save you some time. A couple of big tips off the start end. Number one, when you're working in Excel, always create a copy of whatever worksheet you're in. So if you have some big data, you want to make sure you create an additional tab of that for when you're going to manipulate it and edit it. You always have an original to go back to. It's not fun if you have to keep downloading the same thing over and over again because you don't have a copy every time you make a mistake. And trust us, we've been doing it for combined, probably working in Excel for 15, 20 years. We make lots of mistakes still and have to go back to those original files. The second tip of the day will be to always create a notes tab, especially when you're doing some complex things in Excel or you're formatting specific data or anything like that. Creating a notes tab as a reference for you in the document is a good way for you to know exactly what you did, because you will forget when you've been working in it for an hour or two trying to manipulate it. And it's a good way for people who open the document to see exactly what you were doing and what you were trying to do. So 2 quick tips off of that, and we're going to actually jump into our first polling question now.
Okay, here we go, guys. Have you downloaded the materials for the training? Pretty easy question to answer. Yes, no, you're currently downloading, or what materials? Which they're in the handout section, so go ahead and take time to do that. And answer this. Remember, you need to answer this and the other 2 polling questions. They should be in a blue screen, by the way. A blue pop-up window should have appeared. That's where you're going to go ahead and log your vote. We're going to give you guys a few seconds to make sure everybody's got time to get their votes in. So get your vote in, and then if you haven't done so, head over to the handout section and get your materials. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. All right, we're going to close the question out, and let's share the results. All right. What materials? Okay, let's go ahead and we'll close this out, and we can continue with our presentation.
All right, so we are going to turn our cameras off because this will be a very hands-on learning experience. We want you to be able to focus on what we're sharing. So in the handouts that Janice just referenced, You'll see 2 documents that are also available on the James Moore website. The first is 10 powerful Excel formulas. I'm not going to read through them as we're going to cover most of these later today. The second page is our Excel shortcut cheat sheet. There's a lot here, but there's a lot that you probably use every day that you actually don't think about. We'll go over a few of these and then we'll cover a number of them also going through the materials. So also in your handout, you should have your Excel file, and that's what we're going to start on, going through some of these Excel tips and tricks. So again, these are some of our power formulas that we think will be most useful for you in your everyday work and to help make you more efficient in Excel. First are a few of those keystrokes and shortcuts, some that you might use every day. One of the one I think is most important is Control S. That's going to be Control save your document if it's not in a read-only file. The Control S will save your document, and then Control Z will undo something you did. So if you typed something you weren't really wanting to type, just Control Z. That goes back to what Dakota was saying, is making a copy. So if you make too many changes and you can't undo them, you can always go back to the original. Other keystrokes that you probably use every day, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And then you can go through the rest of them on your own because we do need to save a little bit of time from our technical issues earlier. So the first function we want to show you is the count function. So you might have a set of data and you want to count what is in that data. As auditors, we tend to want to count specific things such as how many checks are in a check listing. So there's a few ways you can do this. We can use the formula bar up top. And if you know specifically what you want to do, but you're not sure what the formula is, you can just type it in and then it'll tell you all of the functions as well as give you an example below. So we're going to use the count function. And we want to count how many checks are in this listing. So you can select all of your data, which there's a few ways you can do this. You can hold the first cell, drag all the way down. That's going to take you a little bit of time. You can also click the first cell, Control Shift and down arrow will select all of the data for you. And then you can also click the top cell, hold Shift and click the last cell, and that will also select all of the data for you. So click OK. It says 0, which we know there are checks here, so there's an issue there. Anytime you're in Excel and you see this green triangle, it indicates an error in the cell. You can click this warning symbol and it'll tell you what it is. So number stored as text. The count function will only work on numbers, so we can't use this text. There's a couple ways you can convert it. The easiest way is to select all of your data, go back to your warning, and you can convert it to a number. It does get rid of the zeros, so if you do need to use that 0, you can use the value function to keep that. So our result is 134 items. The next function that we use from time to time is if you go into your data, you can use text to columns. Sometimes we'll do this if there's multiple things in a data set that we need. So if there was a check number followed by a vendor, you can use text to columns. I tend to use fixed width. I don't think I've ever used delimited. And then you go through and you select where you want it, and it essentially splits that data for you and puts it into however many columns you select. So the data in between each line will be a column. This shown would be 2. Now we'll go ahead and cancel that. All right, the next function we want to show you is if you go to your mailing list. Let me just zoom out a little here. So count, we said, only works when you have a number. So if we wanted to count how many Y's were in this column, we need to use a different function. So I'm going to go back to the formula bar. I'm going to type in count again and see what I get. Count if, you have to set a criteria, so I don't want to use that right now. Count A does count the number of cells in a range that are not empty, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. I'm going to select all of the data in this column, and it will give me a result of 11. So that's using the count A formula. There are a few different ways to get the same result. So you can use a count if formula, which we were just looking at. And you can type in formulas, or you can go to the formula bar. I suggest going to the formula bar if you're not really sure what you're looking for, or if you're not really sure what the inputs are. So if I go to count if, and I go to the formula bar, it'll pop up what the count if formula is, and I can select my range, which I want to count everything in the mailing list because I want to know how many are yes and how many are no. And then I can set my criteria. There's two ways to set criteria. If you manually set it by typing in what you want, so say we want to look for yes, it tells me that my formula result is 0. So what you have to do anytime in a formula when you're manually setting your criteria, you have to use parentheses before and after your criteria. And then it gives us a result of 11, which we know is correct. So I'm going to hit OK. And then you can copy down this formula and change your criteria so that you can count the no's. However, it does say that it's still yes, and it does shift my data down. So there is a quick way to fix that. You can manually fix it by shifting up the column. Or you can go back to your original formula, and if you know that your range is not going to change, but you're going to run multiple formulas on it, you can lock your cell by clicking within that range and hitting F4, and you'll see that it throws in $ before the column and before the row number. And you want to do it on both and hit enter. Now if I Control D, that copies it down. It's still saying Y, so there's two things. I can either change that to no, or you can also just reference a cell for your criteria. So if we deleted that and reference our cell, and then we copy that down, you'll see that it changes the cell to G26 so that it's no. All right, so moving along, we're going to go back to the disbursement tab. And one formula that we use pretty regularly are sums, summing up multiple sets of data that we receive from clients. There's multiple ways you can sum a listing or some other data. So one is to just go to the bottom. We do already have a sum here, so I'm going to delete that just for purposes of showing you. And you can go to your home tab, and all the way to the right side, there's an auto sum. If you click that, it's automatically going to pull every cell that's connected that's a number for you, so it can give you a total. I'll scroll up here so you can see it pulls right under the payment, and if you hit enter, it's 398,000. You should still see that number on your copy. We can also go to the formula bar if we weren't sure what we wanted. And you can use various different words, but let's say we wanted to add it together. Sum pops up as the first option, so we're going to sum, and then we want to click our first set of data, our first cell in our data, and we can Control Shift down, and it selects the entire column for us. So that's the second way to do it. And then you can also use keystrokes to sum. So if you do Alt and then equals on your keyboard, that will also pull the sum for you. So a few different ways. You can pick which one would be more efficient for you and which you think is easier as far as the keystrokes go. But Excel gives us multiple ways to get the same result. Okay. Next, we want to go over filters. So often when I get data, I'm looking to filter it because I want to see specific information in that. So there's a few ways you can do filters. You can, from your home page on the right side, go to sort and filter and click filter, but you want to be here in this cell where your header is. Add a filter, and you'll see that it added all these filters for you, and you can filter based on what you're looking for. So if we wanted to look for, say, one specific vendor, and it would filter out and show us only checks from that vendor. We want to take that off. Another way that you can do a filter, you can also go to the data and the filter is also there. You can also do Control, Shift, and L, and that will add a filter for you. And we're going to Control Z and take that off. You can also just sort your data. So if you do Control A and you're clicked within the table that you're looking at, it's going to select all of the connected information in that table for you. The only downside to that is if you have a row that is empty, it's going to treat that row as a break in the data, so you won't be able to use that Control A function. So for instance, say you have a large set of data, there's a row in there that's hidden. It came over from your system like that. If you pull the report from your system and say it's hidden, I'm doing control A, it breaks at that row. Now it's going to shift you down to the bottom. So you'll probably see, okay, that's broken. If you have a large Excel file with thousands of rows and you're trying to do this, you might not catch that there's a hidden row in there. So that's the only downfall of using the control A function. And then other quick keystrokes that we like to use that we probably mentioned already, but control and using any directional arrows with shift will select all of the data for you. So if you control shift to the right and then down, it's going to pull everything in that table for you. All right. Next is a function that we may use to help us sort some data. So on this tab, the disbursement data trim tab, you'll see we have a list of vendors and we have payments made. So if I want to add a filter, I Control Shift L. Nope. Have to be clicked into your table. Control Shift L, add a filter. I want to see the vendors A to Z. All right, so I've got C, I've got E, T, and then it jumps to B. So there's something wrong here in these cells. It looks like there's some spaces in front of the vendor names that are causing me issues that I can't sort the data properly. So I'm not really sure what formula would help me with that, but I do know I want to remove spaces. So we know it's not count if, we covered that. VLOOKUP, I can read the description. That's not really what I'm looking for. I'm going to use trim because it removes all spaces from a text string except for the spaces between words. And you only need to select where you want to remove your space from. So you just select the cell right here, hit enter, and now it's removed the space. So a couple ways you can copy this data down. You can just drag it down. You can Control D if you're going just one cell down. You can also double click the green square here. This one. I can line my mouse up and it will copy all that data down for you. So now if we add the filters again, and I sort this A to Z, now it's going to properly sort because that space is removed there. Okay. All right. Next, we are going to jump back to the disbursements tab. Now, these are not formulas I tend to use on a regular basis. However, they are useful to know. So we're going to cover them pretty briefly. But again, you can go back and look at this on the YouTube video if you're not really sure and you want to play around with it some more. So I want to start by inserting a column. So I can click and I can do right click and I can insert, and it's going to insert a column to the left. Or I can Control Shift and then equals to get the plus to insert a column. However, if you are like me and you work on a 10 key a lot and you rely on that 10 key plus sign, you can control and do plus sign on your 10 key, and that's going to insert a column for you. Now the formulas I wanted to cover are left, mid, and right. It essentially pulls what specific characters you want either to the left of a text string, to the right of a text string, or in the middle of the text string. So if you wanted to pull, for instance, the first 3 letters to the right of the vendor number, because you just wanted to see what letters made up the vendor number, you would select your text, which it tells us to do right there, and then you select the number of characters. I want to select the 3 characters, so I want to see what letters make up the vendor number. And again, you can just double click, pull that down. You can also do mid, select where you want to pull from. And mid, you have to tell the formula where you want it to start. So say I want the 3 numbers in the middle that start with the E, or we'll start with the A. I want to start with the second character, which is A. and I want 3 characters returned. And it's going to return that AE0 for me. And then the last one is write. It's the same function, it's just going the other way. So if I wanted to see the numbers that make up the vendor string, it will return those. Okay. Next, we're going to jump over to our concatenate tab. Well, you can all see this pretty well. Concatenate is a formula that I use on a pretty regular basis, but if you're not sure what it is, we'll go over it quick enough so that you can hopefully get a good understanding of it. So I might get this set of data that has the first name, middle initial, last name, all in separate columns. I don't want to have to type that and combine it into one column myself. I would rather combine that using a formula. So if I didn't know what concatenate was, I could go to the insert function button and just type combine. You don't have to use a lot of words, just I would use like 1 or 2 keywords and see what you get. So I don't want to use a text function. I look at concatenate, the description sounds like something I want to do. Bear with me as I'm in the wrong cell. I don't want to do that. All right. And then it pops up and you have to select the text that you want to combine. So if I want to combine the first name, the middle initial, and the last name into one cell, I would click that. Okay, looks like it did what I wanted it to do. However, there's no spaces in there. So we do have to add spaces. So the way you would do that is just go up in the formula bar, and you can do this also. I'll show you how to do it in the formula box as well. But like I said earlier, anytime you set a criteria yourself, you need to use parentheses. So you're going to use the parenthesis, space, and then a closed parenthesis before the middle initial and after. And that gives me the name, and then you can just drag down. However, you can also go here and set it this way. The formula box is a great way to start using formulas if you're not familiar with them, because it's really easy to guide you step by step through the formula. So another thing that I use concatenate for a lot in my job, as I'm sure other auditors are familiar with, is if you have to combine numbers, which you can use concatenate on as well. It's not just for text. So I might get, a file that has multiple columns that I need to combine to make an account number or to create some other kind of number. So if we wanted to combine numbers, I'll show you how to do that as well. So say we had multiple zeros, and then we wanted to combine it with a second set of text string. Well, first, I wanted this to be 4 zeros, so that's a problem. And the way you would fix that is you go to your home and you just have to change what the text format is. So right now it's set to general. It's automatically going to do that because Excel thinks that you don't want 4 zeros. So we need to change that to text. And then we just need to type those 4 zeros again. And then it's just the same step as you did earlier. So concatenate the first set you want and the second set you want. And what's great about this is you can kind of do it any way that you want to format your data. So if you wanted to do a hyphen in the middle of that, you could add that in there and it's going to break that up for you. Okay. So that covers concatenate. One of the features that I love in Excel that I just learned about a year or 2 ago is that you can do a dual view. And this actually works in Word as well as PDF. So if you're working on one document, but you want to see something, you're in a PDF and you want to see something that's on page 150, but you also need to see page 5 and you don't want to jump back and forth. Or if you're working in Excel in multiple worksheets and you want to be able to see both worksheets at the same time, you just have to click on New Window. It's going to pop up a new window for you. Let me try to not upset my computer here. And it's the same exact workbook that you're already in. It's just a mirror image, but you can work in both and it's gonna carry over to the other window. So if I typed, I want you to be able to see it. So if I typed 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that it's also typing over here as well. You just wanna make sure you save. I think if you close the dual and then you keep working on this one, you just have to save one instance of it and it'll save for you. That's probably one of the most key Excel tricks in my opinion. It has really helped with my efficiency. All right, so one last thing I want to cover with you all are pivot tables. So I am going to go back to the disbursement pivot tab in your Excel file. This is going to be pretty brief, so hopefully it covers enough that you can get in there and play with it and figure out pivot tables and how they work. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the data for the pivot table. So you can hold the mouse down and drag it. You can click the first cell. You can Control A and it's going to pull the whole table for you. See that we have no hidden rows in this one, so that's great. You can click that first cell, Control Shift, right and then down, down and then right. Either way it'll work. And then we want to go to the Insert tab. I'm just going to scroll up here. And we want to insert a pivot table. Now you can select the data before or after you select Insert on the pivot table. And we need to make sure too when we do a pivot table that we have headers. It's going to be important as far as filtering the data, and you'll see that in the next step. So the first step in creating a pivot table is selecting your range, and the second step is where you want it to be placed so that it's easier to see. I want to put it in the existing worksheet. You just have to select the cell that you want the top corner of your pivot sheet to go into. So I just selected this cell and I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to get a warning. So the pivot table field name is not valid. Well, I can see that I have all my headers. The only problem is that if you have a hidden column and there's no header on that data, it's not going to work. So real quick, because this is a short or a small Excel file, I can see that column C is hidden. So I'm just going to unhide that. It just looks like a copy of the check number, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So not necessary for what I'm trying to do. I'm going to go back over. Actually, let's not do that. We're going to go into pivot table. And then once you get in here, notice that it already selects all the data for me. It recognizes this is a table and this is probably what you want. I'm going to select my existing worksheet and click that cell. I'm going to hit OK. It comes over blank, so then we just need to format our table. And this is all dependent on what you really want to get out of your pivot table. So that's kind of the key factor here. For me, I think I would usually want to see the vendor name as well as the total vendor payments. So I'm going to start with the name. If you click it, the pivot table in Excel will kind of make an assumption on where you want it to go. So if I click the name, it automatically drops the name into rows right here. If I click the payment, it's going to drop the payments right here into the values. You can also drag and drop information down. So if I wanted to add the quarter under columns, I can drag it from above, and it's going to put all of the quarters into columns for me here. Now, I might not want the quarters there. I might just want to see the payments, and I might not even want to see the dollar value of payments. Might want to know how many checks did we write to that vendor. You can just go into the arrow button here, value field settings, and you can select how you want to summarize your data. So you can count, and it's going to tell you how many checks were written to that vendor. I'm just going to put it back to sum. So we said that we can put quarters and columns here. The other thing we can also do is we can filter it by quarter. So if you drop anything in the filter, it's going to add a filter to the top here. It's going to tell you what you're filtering. Right now it's selected for all quarters, but I can look at just the second quarter. I can also select multiple items and look at maybe the first and second quarter, see what we paid the first half of the year. I'm going to select all again. one little tidbit that you do want to know is anytime your data is changed that goes into the pivot table, you're going to need to refresh your pivot table. It's not going to refresh automatically. So say, for instance, this Copernicus, we're going to change it. I don't want it to be bigger than that. We're paying them $10 million. So you'll see over here that Copernicus, it's still showing we only paid $64,000. All you need to go is to the pivot table tools, click analyze, and refresh. And then it's going to refresh your data for you. And then the last little trick with a pivot table is you can copy and paste so that you can have multiple pivot tables, but you can kind of change the way they look, and then also helps with deciding what you want to see in your pivot table. So if I copy, Control C, and I just Control V right underneath, it's going to pop up a new pivot table fields. So I'm going to change this. I don't want the quarter to be here. And I think I would rather have the vendor number show in the rows. And I'm going to remove this. So now I can see the vendor number and then the sum of payments. All right. And then lastly, on pivot tables, you can drill down into the data to see what you're looking for. So this is a huge checklisting. This is our pivot table. I'm looking at this saying that doesn't really look right. Why is that number so large? That shouldn't be that big. You can double click that number and, okay, might get a warning. All right, and it will drop into a new sheet for you all of the transactions that make up that number in the pivot table. So then you can look, here are all the checks to Copernicus, and you can pinpoint what stands out for you. So I think that covers everything that I wanted to go over with you. Dakota, did you have anything, any comments, any questions?
No, I think you did a good job of covering all that, Hillary. So we'll have Janice jump in with polling question number 2.
And here we go. What is your current Excel skill level? I dread the thought of Excel and opening spreadsheets. I use it daily for normal tasks. I know some fancy tricks, but I'm still improving. Or spreadsheets bow before me and bend to my will. Go ahead. Remember, you need to answer all 3 polling questions. If you can't see the blue pop-up window, try minimizing the screen, your main webinar screen. Sometimes it hides behind that main screen. We're going to give you guys about 5-10 more seconds to get this, and then we'll have to move on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll now. Get your answers in. And we're closing the poll. There we go. And let's share the results here. Yeah, we've got plenty of people who've got some good experience with it, even a few experts. All right, I'm going to close this out now, and I believe Dakota is going to take over with his part of the presentation.
Thanks, Janice. Yeah, sorry for the rush through some of these things. I know we're flying through a little quickly, and half of that's because of some of the technical difficulties. So I'm going to try to slow down a little bit, but still try to get us out of here on time. I'll make sure we get the 3rd polling question up for those of you who need CPE credit. So Hillary did a good job talking through some of the basic formulas, a few others in there that are advanced that we utilize on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to go ahead and walk us through some that I really like. They're slightly more advanced, but nothing too complicated. So I'm going to start on the disbursement tab, and we're going to talk about the sum if and the sum ifs function. And I'll give you my slight rant, and I'll pull it up. Notice I can, as Hillary already mentioned, you can type it in there, or you could go to the formula bar up there, and you could search for keywords to try to find these. So, and then this gives you the different function arguments that are popping up. So you can see here it wants me to specify a range, and it'll even define here, a range is the cells you want evaluated. So if you ever really don't know what Excel's asking you to do, it's going to define it pretty easily in the function arguments if you don't know what's going on. So my slight rant here.
Your screen, Dakota, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your screen is not being shown.
No.
Yeah. It's got the Excel tips and tricks main screen. So we're not seeing your Excel. There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
There
Sorry
we go.
about that. Just
Thank you, everybody who
popped up.
submitted the question. Appreciate it.
Apologies about that. A couple more technical difficulties for our time today. Just added up to a Wednesday. So yeah, I was just showing about summarizing a sum if function, and then in the formula bar, you can actually see the function arguments and what it's telling you, because it's defining a range of criteria in a sum range. So this will be the last time I ever really talk about a sum if function, because I hate it. It has absolutely no purpose. It limits you to only one criteria range, and a sum ifs function does the exact same thing. It's a little more logical, and you can use multiple criteria with that, which we'll touch on in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my sum ifs function. I'm going to go ahead and bring up in the function argument so you can see the sum ifs is already more logical because it asks for the first thing that we want to summarize as a range. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want to sum in this column, column E, and as Hillary already touched on, I'm going to use Control Shift and down to go ahead and select all of my data. And then it's going to say, okay, what criteria range do you want? So this is the range of cells you want evaluated for a particular condition that we get to define. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll back up here, and I'm actually going to use the exact same data set. And now maybe, you know what I mean, I really only care about some of the big payments that are coming through that I'm paying to people. So let's say I want to know anything over $1,000. So as Hillary did touch on earlier, you do have to use quotations when you're using any signs, text, or anything like that, or Excel's not going to pick that up. So I'm start with my quotes, use my little alligator sign for the UF fans out there, and I'm going to put $1,000. And here you can see that it's instantly actually popped up what it's going to be, because it's going to show you if your formula is working or not. So it says it's going to be 370,000. Go ahead and click OK. And you can see that $370,000 is worth of my disbursements that are over $10,000. So just a quick thing to remember there, you do have to have those quotes, and otherwise it's not going to pick that up and you're going to get an error. Most of the time I find when I get mad at Excel for not doing what I want it to do, I'm the one who has messed something up. For some reason, it doesn't normally fight back when I'm yelling at it. I really don't understand why. But just remember that it's probably something the user error 90% of the time, and I've been around long enough to do a decent amount of user error. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this out here, and then I'm going to go ahead and start another sum ifs function, because I could also summarize it using ranges and columns that Hillary touched on earlier. So say I want to sum this whole range of column E, and I want to do it again, and I want to go ahead and do the greater than $1,000 one more time. And you can see now it's popping up 768,000 and some change. So I know from earlier and from looking at the spreadsheet a lot before this presentation that the total of this is not $768,000. So there has to be something in this payment column that it's picking up. And as Hillary touched on earlier, we actually do have a sum in this column. So when you use columns like that, you need to make sure if you've got a sum that you're also adding in, it could additionally pick that up as well. Since we clarified we wanted anything greater than $1,000, well, that sum formula in itself is greater than $1,000. So Excel is assuming that we want to look at that as well. So just something to be aware of as you're double counting it. And it's a good thing also, as I mentioned at the very start, to have a copy of your original somewhere so you can always look back to that to make sure you can tie your totals out. So other things you can do with sum ifs similar to the count ifs, we can do it on specific names. So we did it on the mails tab for a yes or no with a count function. We're also going to do it here to actually summarize different things by vendor name. So I'm going to go ahead and select the full column, type in my equals sum ifs, say I want to sum my column E because that's my payments. My criteria range this time I'm going to use column D. So I'm going to use the names of these vendors. And let's say I want to do it for Emmett Brown. Sounds like a nice person. So I'm going to type in Emmett Brown. Notice I have my quotations, so that way I'm telling Excel, hey, you need to pay attention to this, even though these are characters. And there, it has summed all of my payments in this range to Emmett Brown. And I could double check by applying a filter on this. I could then, filter it by Emmett Brown and double check, but I'll guarantee this one, it works out. So you can do it that way for Emmett Brown, or I can also reference to a specific cell. So if I wanted to, I could go right here into my formula. I could make a quick edit, and I could even select just this cell D20 for Emmett Brown, and it'll do the exact same thing. Only issue is then if you delete this out, it's not going to be very happy, because then this formula here is now saying, hey, I'm trying to pick up that nothing's there and there's a blank row. I'm not sure what I'm grabbing. So I'm just using Control Z to move that out. So just something to think about. The easiest way I do sum ifs, and we'll walk through this kind of fast, so I apologize in advance, is I will copy and paste my vendor that I kind of want, or the data set that I want to work with, and then I can run my sum if for function referencing to it outside of the data, so you can make sure you don't like mess with anything. So I'm going to do the exact same function we just ran, summing column E, criteria range of the vendor name. So I have equal Emmett Brown. Now that he's out here, you can see that it'll pick that up. Same as the other ones. So as Hillary did mention, pivot tables you do have to refresh. Sum if formulas you do not. It's automatically running. So even if I go in here and I delete out this Emmett Brown, you can see that my total changed. Or if I went into here and kind of put in however much money, $1 million or something that Hillary had used earlier, you can see that the sum ifs automatically does jump to say, oh, hey, now we paid him over $10 million. Just something to remember, that the sum ifs is quite dynamic, and the pivot table does freeze, so you do have to keep refreshing that as you go along. Another useful thing that also makes the sum ifs almost the same as a pivot table from time to time is you can actually sum everything by these vendors, and I'm going to show you how to remove duplicates really quickly. So I copied and pasted everything, so just Control Shift down on the name, Control C, and Control V, as Hillary walked us through earlier. And now in column H here, you can see I've got this folder name column. I'm going to go to Data, tab at the very top here. There's a Remove Duplicates button. So I'm going to hit Remove Duplicates. It's going to say, hey, you want to do this in this name column? I'm going to say OK. And it removed 118 values, and there's 16 unique ones left. So I have 16 unique vendors that I've paid here. So then I'm going to insert my same sum ifs function we just talked about, using the criteria of this vendor name. And then as Hillary showed us, I can just double click right here. And this gives me the total of all the payments that I've actually paid my vendors. And I'm going to do all equals, little shortcut trick. So there's 398,000 in total. And just to double check, hey, that's 398,000 in total, which it should be, because I've got all my vendors isolated over here. So it's the same amount as that pivot table, it's just another way to get to it. Excel is going to offer you multiple different ways in order to extract and analyze data. So just because someone's doing it one way doesn't mean you can't do it another way. There could be a more efficient way, but sometimes whatever works for you is the best. And very, very quickly, I did touch on that a sum if formula is trash, and I really want you to remember that from today. Please don't use it in any of your spreadsheets. And the reason for that is because sum ifs can use multiple criteria. So we're going to do this very quickly to use multiple criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and do summing range of the payment column again, use the vendor name. I'm going to do it specifically on the C&E vendor. And then I'm going to say again, well, I'd only like it if it's going to be greater than $1,000. So I'm going to go here just to my little function argument so you guys can see it lets me go to a new criteria range. And for those of you that are curious, yes, I could keep going. You can scroll down and you can see this criteria range 127. I will say if you're using 127 criteria ranges, I think we've missed the point on how we can simplify this, because that's going to be a heck of a formula that nobody wants to follow. I don't want to follow it. I'm the one teaching this class right now. So for my second criteria range, I'm going to go back to my column for payment, and I'm going to go ahead and type in again, starting with the quotations, Gator sign, go Gators, greater than $1,000. And then you can see it's going to spit out a output for me right there. And there we have $4,938. So of the payments that I made to C&E, 4,938 were the total that were over $1,000. So just something to note there. You can also do this on, you can also do this using a date. So I will try to do this very quickly for you because I am running a little short. I'm going to go ahead and move the criteria range to this check date column there. And I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, what if it's greater than, let's just do 1/6/2016. And it's not going to be happy because I didn't put in my alligator sign, which is sad because I'm here in Europe right now. So there you can go. So it picked up $5,390 worth of my checks and just payments were made after 1/5, and you can see it's the first one in here that we backed out. So it can do it multiple ways. Once again, if you really get over 2 or 3 of them, we probably lost the point of the exercise and how we can make it easy for you guys to do this. So just a quick point there. The other thing I was going to show very, very quickly, but I also want to make sure we get our other polling question in first. So I'm actually going to throw that to the polling question first, and then I'll show you this last big tip that I have. So
Here you
Janice,
go.
I'll let you take it away.
Yep, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'd read them for you, but I think you got these. So. And remember, you need to answer these questions in order to get your CPE, and also hang on till the end. We'll take a little longer if we need to, but I know you guys have stuff to do. So at the end, the polling question, the survey link will be displayed. That will need to be filled out too. Okay, we're just about done with this question. Give you guys a few more seconds. Get those votes in, and we're closing. So let's see what the results are. We have some philosophers here about the construct thing. Okay, guys, here you go. Dakota, continue.
Yeah, times a construct was the correct answer. I'm not sure if we knew that, but it definitely was.
Says Dakota.
Yes, says my opinion, which means nothing. So here we go. Real quick, I'm just going to add in a quick pivot table, similar to how Hillary had done on her other one. So I've selected all the data. I'm going to insert pivot table. I'm going to do it in this existing sheet. I'm going to go ahead and put it right here in this cell. And then you can see here, so now I can go ahead and do my name and my payment, which automatically applies. This is just another way to kind of show that, hey, these two things are actually equal and they're the exact same thing. So just a quick note, once again, more than one ways to do it. In Excel, you can always find a way to make your life easier, which is one of the things I want everybody to take away from today. So very, very quickly, I'm going to touch on a VLOOKUP formula. This is going to be the quickest introduction to a VLOOKUP anyone's probably been through, but it's going to be okay. So we're going to pop over to the vendor tab. And here we've got our vendor names, we've got the IDs, we've got their addresses and everything. And we want to say, okay, well, how can I just easily grab the total payments that we've made to them? So we can utilize that sum ifs or that pivot table I just put in to do this, but we also have to know what formula that we need. And in this case, it is a VLOOKUP formula. So I'm going to go ahead and type it in and then explain it slightly when we go to our function arguments box. So there's the VLOOKUP. It looks awful. Trust me, the first time I've done this, I was very afraid of it. It had 4 boxes. I've never seen anything that had 4 boxes right off the start before. But it's really not that bad. So basically, you can read there, this looks for the value in the leftmost column of a table that we choose, and then returns a value in the same row from a column we specify. And by default, it'll look for the first one in the next cell, and I'll talk on that a little bit. So basically, long story short, we know all we want to do is get the total number of payments for this vendor into this particular tab. So you have to choose which cell it's going to look up. That's the lookup value. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the name Copernicus and Brown. And then I'm going to go to the table array. So then it says, what table am I trying to look at? So in this case, I'm going to go to the disbursements tab. And I'm going to go ahead and utilize our sum ifs columns. Actually, I'm going to do the pivot table. Do the pivot table columns K and L. So now I'm telling it that I want it to look at my disbursement tab at column K and L. And then it's going to ask me for a column index. So this is the column number in the table array from which the matching value should be returned. So basically it's asking me which column do you want us to try to pull information from. I want payments in this case, and I know my disbursement tab had column K and L, so L is my second column in there. So you want to specify it as a 2, so it's going to look in the second column. And then the range lookup is saying, is it a logical value that we can find that's going to match? So think backwards on this. True means it's like omitted, it's not there. False means it's an exact match. So I'm going to go ahead and type in false. And here you can see that a number is popping up, 12,124.72. If I go back over here to the disbursement tab, you can see that for Kursk and Brown, we had paid them $12,124.72. And I can copy that down and bring that in. So as a note, it does have to use the farthest left column. And I'll show you really quickly what I mean by that. If I put in this VLOOKUP and I do the exact same thing, I'm over on this disbursement tab and say I start in column J and then do K and L. So already, I'm starting in column J. It's already telling me it's kind of not sure what to look for. There's nothing really there that it's finding. If I did column index number 2, and if it is false, you can see that it's actually not giving me anything here in the output. So it will give you a not applicable sign, and it will tell you the value is not available if there's an error. They offer you the help on the error. The help on the error box isn't very helpful because Excel doesn't know 100% what you're trying to do. But in this case, that's all because this column, we started in column J, and the VLOOKUP has to start in the column that we're looking up those values. So just something I wanted to know there at the end of it. And the last little thing I want to say is it does really only help with stuff like this if it's summed up in this particular example. So if I did a normal VLOOKUP on the full data set without it being pivot tabled or using our SUMIFs function, not the SUMIF function, I can do the same thing. Go to my disbursement tab. I'm going to start in column D because I know it needs to be my leftmost column needs to match up. Go to my payments. Do 2 again because I want to grab from the payment column, which is my second column. Let's start in D. E would be number 2. Type in false. And the first thing it's going to pick up is $106. That's all it's going to pick up because VLOOKUP is just going to return that first value that we have there. If we scroll down here for Copernicus and Brown, we can see that the first one is this $106. So not very useful if we wanted to go one by one and kind of do that, because you could run that formula over and over again. That's going to keep giving you $106. So just as a general note, you'd want to look at something if you're trying to add up the total payments from that and use the VLOOKUP as a total sums function, because if there's more than one vendors, if you had duplicates in there, it's not ever going to pick up that full total that you're doing, so you're not going to get right in. Apologize for the crash course that was on the VLOOKUP. As a reminder, and for everyone at the end of this too, this will be on YouTube. So if you really want to have something fun to do this weekend and you want to watch an Excel YouTube video, be our guest. It'll definitely be available. And I know we're right up against 3:15 here, and I know we have a few questions that have probably come in. Okay. But it sounds like none of them are too important, or well, they probably are extremely important, but not probably ones that we can get done in 2 or 3 minutes. So the last thing I'm going to bring in and just show you guys is manipulating data on this Edit Data tab. So this is what a normal kind of workbook looks like through QuickBooks, kind of an export. You can see it's an AR schedule. It's got 1, 30, 60, and 90 days. I just want everyone to know that just because your system spits something out that way does not mean that we have to keep it that way. So you can manipulate your schedules however you want, but one of my first trips of the day I was going to say is making sure we create a copy. So I'm going to create a first copy there. Now I've got this other sheet where I can edit this. And let's say I'm looking at this and I know, okay, I don't really want all this other stuff here. I don't want these blank spaces. I really don't want all the totals anywhere. I don't want to have to mess with any of that. I just want the actual data that's in there. So Hillary showed us how to filter earlier. So I just use Control-Shift-Right over here to select everything as I moved over. Then I could use Control-Shift-Down. I could also use Control-End. And then I'm going to apply my filter. I use a little shortcut. I like Alt-AT for mine. And now I notice here's when you need to look at what's a key item. It's a key identifier, something unique in the rows of the items that you want. So for instance, for all this data here, I've noticed that each one of them has a name. So you can see Chamber of Commerce, all these add up with the individual things that I'm looking for. So in this name column, I can come here, deselect all, I can grab blanks. And then I'm going to go ahead and just delete these blanks to get these out of here because I don't want to actually have to look at them. So Shift spacebar selects all my rows. Control Shift down will select all the data. You can see it goes down to 104,000 lines. Control minus gets rid of it. And then I'm going to clear my filter. And you can see all I have left with here is just all of the actual data I have. And if I wanted to check it back to the original, you can see my total here is $48,246 at the bottom. And then there's $48,246 here. So this is by far an extremely abbreviated example, because I know all of you and all of your organizations use multiple different data sets and you have multiple different reports, and they're probably not only 30 reps for the most part. But this is just something that you want to make sure you have the freedom to do when you're tearing apart your data, trying to just get to exactly what you're looking for, manipulating your spreadsheets. And everything is fine and it'll all work out okay as long as you have copied the original tab. So as long as you've got that original set aside, you can always go back to it, because I've worked on sheets of these with 30, 40, 50, 60,000 rows before, and I've made a mistake where the total wasn't working out, and I had to go back and I had to start from the original again. And it's fine, and it shows that the original doesn't have any manipulation. We all make mistakes, especially as we're trying some things new. The only other big thing I'll say at the end of the day, if I was doing something more complicated, I would definitely add a notes tab in Excel, and I would go ahead and type out a few notes and everything that I have for the steps that I'm doing as I'm going through this process and editing this data spreadsheet. Not only does it help you remember what was going on, it'll help everyone behind you really take a look and understand what your thought process was, how you did to get your spreadsheet like that. So if it's something that needs to happen on a monthly basis for your organization, you can make sure that other people behind you can do it, just in case you're out on vacation enjoying this lovely summer. And with that, we are right up against 3:15. I apologize for us running through that very quickly at the end. We do appreciate you guys staying on with us through those technical issues that we had at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the slideshow here for the end.
And Dakota and Hillary, thank you so much for your time today. You've given us a lot of great information that I'm sure is going to make everyone's lives a bit easier when working with Excel. And we'd also like to thank all of you in attendance very much for your patience with our late start and with the pace we had to take. I assure you, we'll get back with you promptly to answer your questions. We have a handful of them that came in, and unfortunately, we've run out of time on that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you see on your screen now, we have our two-part premium webinar series coming up on the finer points of Excel. So that information, the links are there to register for each of these sessions. And just remember, each of these sessions is 2 credit hours, not 1.5. And there is a nominal fee of $25 per webinar due to the extent that we take a deep dive into the material and the preparation time needed. If you have questions regarding Excel for your organization, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dakota or Hillary. Their contact information should be on your screen now. Again, those of you who submitted questions, they will be contacting you via email to go ahead and answer those questions for you. I've got those questions jotted down. Finally, the last session of our 2021 Government CPE series will be held 3 weeks from today on July 14th at 2 p.m. If you haven't already registered, we encourage you to do so. And you'll also see a second link there. That is because you can rewatch all of the previous webinars in the series from our website. This one will go up in the coming days as well. So you'll be able to rewatch this, maybe pause while you take some notes so that you can get the information there too. Finally, don't forget, on the next screen, you're going to see the link to fill out the evaluation. This is required as part of your CPE credits. So go ahead. And again, these are all going to be in PDF that you downloaded and that will email out to you. It's been our pleasure to bring today's information to you. So have a great rest of the day, everybody. And please continue to stay safe and healthy. Have a great day. Bye-bye.